The Young Monk Ikkyu. About 600 years ago, there was a young trainee monk by the name of Ikkyu who lived in a temple called Angokuji in Kyoto. Ikkyu was studying to become a monk. Ikkyu was only 5 years old and had only recently arrived at the temple. He was the youngest among the young trainee monks studying at this temple. Although very young, Ikkyu was even better than adults when it came to wit. One evening, Ikkyu was told to put out the light in front of the statue of the Buddha and blew on the candle to put the light out. The monk who saw this was very surprised and said to Ikkyu, "The breath of a human being is unclean, and you must not breathe on the Lord Buddha. From now on, blow out the candle using your hands." The next day, the monk and the young trainee monks were reciting the prayers in front of the Lord Buddha. But for some reason, laughter could be heard today. The monk, who wondered what was going on, looked behind him and saw that Ikkyu was sitting there reciting the prayers with his back to the Lord Buddha. "Ikkyu, you must not sit with your back to the Lord Buddha." Though scolded, Ikkyu calmly said, "I am sitting here with my back to the Lord Buddha so that my unclean breath will not reach him." "Ah, but when you read the prayers, you must sit facing the Lord Buddha." The monk was troubled, but had to agree that Ikkyu was good indeed at wit. Even the usually stern monk had one secret pleasure. This was to lick malt syrup secretly at night. It was rare for sweets to be served in a temple. Since he was very strict with the trainee monks, the monk could not tell them that he was eating sweets by himself. And so the monk hid the pot with the malt syrup in a cupboard. But the trainee monks knew all about this.
"Malt syrup, how wonderful! Wish we could have some too." "Master, you were secretly licking malt syrup yesterday, weren't you? Please let us lick some too."
The monk was greatly distressed that his secret was out. "That may look like malt syrup, but it is poison for children. If a child licks that, the child will die." Ikkyu listened to the monk's story with fluttering eyelids and thought,
"That sounds fishy."
One day, some days after this,
Crash!
A great disaster took place. While the monk was out, one of the trainee monks who was cleaning the monk's room broke the inkstone that the monk treasured. Though it was just an accident, the young trainee monk who had broken the monk's treasure was on the verge of tears. "The monk will be so angry." Just then, Ikkyu had a bright idea.
"That's it! There should be that pot somewhere."
Ikkyu found the pot in which the monk kept the malt syrup and brought it to the trainee monk who was still crying.
Come, lick some of this poison and let's think about what we should do."
In the evening, the monk who had finished his business returned to the temple to find that the inkstone was broken and there was no malt syrup left. The monk was angry and said, "What are you doing?"
As we broke your precious inkstone, Master, we decided to die and apologize and licked the poison. But however much we licked the poison, we cannot die.
The malt syrup? Darn it, I can't win. The monk became very dejected with the crying monks in front of him, and at last, "All right, don't cry anymore." The monk forgave the trainee monks. Ever since this incident, the other trainee monks began to rely on the wise Ikkyu. What they had been concerned about was about Chikusai the weaver, who was a friend of the monk. Chikusai would come to the temple every 3 days and play a game of Go with the monk. This game would go on into the late night. At the temple, the young trainee monks were not allowed to go to bed before the monk. So on the days that Chikusai came, the young trainee monks would have to stay up, though they were sleepy, and this was of great concern to them. The next day was the day Chikusai would be coming to the temple.
We want to send Chikusai away. Do you have any good ideas?
Ikkyu thought for a day and came up with a great plan. The next day, when Chikusai arrived as usual, there was a sign on the gate of the temple. People wearing fur may not enter the temple. Chikusai always wore a fur coat. The young trainee monks who were hiding and watching were giggling as they thought Chikusai would not be able to enter the temple. But Chikusai grinned when he saw the sign and entered the gate without a care in the world. The young trainee monks were very surprised. Only Ikkyu remained calm and ran up to Chikusai.
Master Chikusai, did you not see the sign? If people wearing fur enter the temple will become unclean, so we must ask you to return.
Chikusai laughed and said,
This temple has a drum in the main altar room. The drum is also made of animal skin.
Ikkyu smiled at this.
Of course you are right. And that is why the drum is beaten with a drumstick every day. Master Chikusai, if you enter the temple, you will also have to be beaten.
Chikusai said,
You got me on that one,
and left the temple. From then on, Chikusai would come to the temple very little. After some time, the monk was invited to Chikusai's house. Chikusai had invited the monk over for dinner and asked that Ikkyu accompany the master. Hearing that it would be a feast, Ikkyu was very happy. When they came to Chikusai's house, there was a river in front of the house and a bridge over the river. There was a new sign at the entrance to the bridge. The sign said, Do not cross this bridge. There is no way to get to Chikusai's house without crossing the bridge. What shall we do? Ikkyu understood at once that Chikusai was playing a trick on them. He is trying to get even.
Master, Please follow me.
Ikkyu went across the bridge without a care in the world. Chikusai was waiting at the other side of the bridge.
Ikkyu, did you not see the sign? Yes, that is why we did not cross the bridge, but walked across it.
Again, Ikkyu had the upper hand, and Chikusai knew he had been beaten. Ikkyu's wit became the talk of Kyoto. One day, a messenger from the shogun arrived at the temple. The shogun wished to meet the famous Ikkyu. Ikkyu went to the shogun's palace together with the monk. The monk was tense, but Ikkyu seemed not to have a care in the world. The shogun said, "So, you are Ikkyu. I have heard you have great wisdom despite your age. As a matter of fact, I have something to ask of you, Ikkyu." The shogun pointed to a large folding screen on which was a beautiful picture of a tiger and said, "When night falls, the tiger comes out of the folding screen and acts violently. I wish you to conquer this tiger." The people around felt sorry for Ikkyu because the shogun's command to conquer the picture of a tiger was an impossible one. But Ikkyu remained calm, took up a strong rope, and stood in front of the folding screen fiercely and said,
I am ready. Lord, chase the tiger out of the folding screen.
"What?" The shogun couldn't help but be surprised at Ikkyu's voice.
Come, Lord Shogun, hurry.
All right, all right. I lose, Ikkyu. The shogun was greatly struck by Ikkyu's wit and rewarded him greatly. After he became an adult, Ikkyu became a great monk. He treated great people and poor people in the same way and helped people who needed help using his wit. The end.